Welcome to Wisdom for the Present, where we take ancient truth and bring it into clear, modern understanding. This episode uses AI-generated narration based on human-researched and written material.
It is always just such a privilege to sift through these ancient texts, finding those pieces that speak directly to our lives today.
Definitely. And, I want you to imagine this scenario for a second. You have just survived a brutal generation-spanning dictatorship. Like you were literally enslaved, making bricks under the crack of a whip.
Right. An absolute nightmare.
Exactly. Then you experienced this series of miraculous interventions that dismantle that entire empire. You literally walk through a parted ocean to absolute freedom.
Yeah.
And then, a few weeks later, you are standing in a harsh desert, looking at your leader, weeping openly and saying, "I miss the garlic we used to have in the labor camps."
It sounds completely absurd when you put it like that.
It really does. But today, we are looking at human nature's terrifying obsession with toxic nostalgia. We are taking a deep dive into the biblical book of Numbers, specifically looking at chapters 11 through 25.
Which is just packed with these kinds of human moments.
It really is. And the mission for you, listening to this right now, is to really extract the practical wisdom, the moral insight, and the life application from these ancient texts.
Because there's a lot to unpack here.
So much.
Yeah.
And we're using the biblical text itself, specifically the WE translation, alongside some absolute classic theological commentaries, Barnes' Notes and Matthew Henry's complete commentary.
Excellent sources.
But before we get to, the crying over garlic, set the stage for us. Like, where exactly are we in the historical narrative?
Yeah, to really understand the psychology of what we are about to unpack, you need to grasp the historical and human context, of the environment they are in. The Israelites have left Mount Sinai. They have received the law. They've built the tabernacle. The initial overwhelming excitement of their liberation from Egypt, that honeymoon phase of freedom, has completely faded.
So the adrenaline is worn off.
Exactly. They are now moving through the wilderness, and wilderness here isn't like a beautiful, scenic national park. It is a harsh, unforgiving, completely barren landscape.
The rocks and sand.
Right. It is the geographic and, frankly, the psychological liminal space between their past trauma in Egypt and their promised future in Canaan.
Wow.
So what we have in these specific chapters of Numbers is essentially a masterclass on human nature under extreme stress. The text strips away all the heroic veneer,
Yeah.
It details constant rebellions, profound leadership crises, and the incredibly painful process of growth.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Right.
Because the very first major crisis we see after they leave Sinai is exactly what I mentioned in the opening, this sudden, intense nostalgia for slavery.
Yes.
And the text notes that it actually starts with a specific group. It calls them the mixed multitude. Who exactly is that?
That is a really crucial detail. When Israel left Egypt, they didn't leave alone. The text in Exodus tells us a mixed multitude went up with them.
Like, whoa, other slaves.
Yeah, likely other enslaved people, maybe opportunistic Egyptians or marginalized folks who saw the plagues, saw the collapse of the Egyptian infrastructure, and just decided to join the Exodus.
Makes sense. Get out while you can.
Right. Matthew Henry, in his commentary, somewhat colorfully refers to them as the riffraff or the hangers-on. They weren't necessarily there because of a deep faith in the God of Israel.
They just wanted a better situation.
Exactly. And when the reality of desert survival sets in, they are the first to break. They start complaining about the food, specifically the manna.
And this is where I really need you to help me visualize this.
Yeah.
Because, the way the text describes this manna, it sounds like a literal miracle food.
Oh, it absolutely was. The commentaries and the text itself give us a very specific sensory description of it to highlight, just how ungrateful this rebellion was. It fell with the dew every single morning. It was abundant. It looked like a resin called bdellium.
Wait, what is bdellium?
Bdellium was a highly prized, semi-transparent, aromatic resin, sort of like a pale yellowish pearl.
Oh, wow. So it's aesthetically pleasing, too.
Right. It looks nice. And the text says they could grind it, bake it, or boil it, and it tasted like fresh oil or pastry baked with oil. It was perfectly designed to sustain them in a place where literally nothing grows.
So they have free, perfectly nutritious, decent-tasting food arriving at their doorstep every single morning.
Every morning.
But the text says the people are weeping. Not just grumbling, like literally standing at the doors of their tents, crying.
Sobbing over food.
Yeah. And the list of what they are crying for is so specific. The fish, the cucumbers, the melons, the leeks, the onions, and the garlic of Egypt. I am struggling to wrap my head around this.
It's crazy, right?
It is. They just escaped brutal taskmasters with whips, and now they are having a collective emotional breakdown over onions. Isn't that completely irrational?
Logically, it is completely absurd. But from a psychological standpoint, it is a profoundly accurate depiction of human nature.
How so?
Well, when the present moment requires faith, endurance, and facing the unknown, humans will almost always romanticize a toxic past simply because it was predictable.
Oh, that hits hard.
If we translate this into a modern understanding, Egypt in this narrative represents the familiar. Yes, Egypt was brutal. Yes, they were oppressed and, their children were thrown into the Nile.
Right. Unspeakable horrors.
But they knew what time the shift ended, and they knew they would get a bowl of leek soup afterward. The human nervous system, when stressed, often prefers the certainty of misery over the anxiety of freedom.
That is so incredibly true. It reminds me of the modern phenomenon of doom scrolling or, even why people stay in incredibly toxic jobs or relationships. The freedom to leave is terrifying because you don't know what's next. You crave the junk food of your past rather than doing the hard work of sustaining yourself in the present.
That's exactly what's happening. The manna represents daily dependence on the unknown. They couldn't hoard it. If they tried to keep it for the next day, it rotted and bred worms.
So they had to rely on it fresh every day.
Right. They had to wake up every single morning and trust that the universe, that God would provide for them again. That level of vulnerability is exhausting for people.
Definitely.
So what do? They rewrite their own history? The commentary points out a brilliant, tragic detail. They talk about eating fish in Egypt freely or for nothing.
For nothing.
Right. They completely ignore the fact that they paid for that fish with their liberty and their blood.
Wow. They conveniently edit out the whips and the brick kilns. It's selective memory as a coping mechanism.
Exactly.
And this massive wave of complaining, it absolutely breaks Moses. Up until now, Moses has been this stoic, towering figure. But here, he hits a wall of severe clinical burnout.
He really does.
He goes to God and has this incredibly raw moment. He basically says, have I conceived all this people? Am I their mother? Have I brought them out? That you should tell me, carry them in your bosom as a nurse carries a nursing infant.
It's such a desperate plea.
Yeah, he's so overwhelmed by the sheer emotional weight of leading 1 million complaining people that he literally asks to be killed. He says, if you treat me this way, please kill me right now. Don't let me see my wretchedness.
It is one of the most authentic descriptions of leadership fatigue in ancient literature. And what is fascinating is how God responds. There is no rebuke for Moses' despair.
Really? No suck it up?
None. There is no lecture on having more faith. God responds to structural burnout with structural help. He tells Moses to gather 70 elders of Israel, men known to be leaders, and bring them to the tent of meeting.
Okay, so a delegation system.
Yes. God says, He will take some of the spirit that is upon Moses and put it upon them, so they can bear the burden of the people with him. This is actually where later Jewish tradition traces the origin of the Sanhedrin, the supreme council that governed Israel centuries later.
Oh, that's fascinating. But there is this administrative hiccup that happens here, which I absolutely love.
Oh, with Eldad and Medad.
Yes. So 2 of the men who were on the list of 70, Eldad and Medad, didn't go out to the tabernacle with the rest of them. For whatever reason, they stayed behind in the camp. But the Spirit rests on them anyway.
Right.
And they start prophesying right there in the middle of the camp, among the tents. And Joshua, who is a young man at this point, Moses' fiercely loyal assistant, hears about this, gets incredibly defensive and runs up to Moses saying, "My Lord Moses, forbid them."
He views it as an unauthorized threat to Moses' monopoly on power.
Exactly. But Moses' response is just brilliant. He says, "Enviest thou for my sake?" Or basically, "Are you jealous for my sake? I wish that all the Lord's people were prophets."
Yeah, Moses isn't hoarding power. He knows that true leadership isn't about maintaining exclusivity. It's about empowering others. He is desperate to share the burden.
Right.
But while the leadership crisis gets a beautiful resolution, the crisis of the people's craving takes a very dark turn. This is where we have to look closely at the wisdom with discernment within the text. God addresses the demand for meat, but not in the way they hope.
Right. God essentially says, you want meat. You are crying because you miss Egypt. Fine, I will give you meat.
Until it comes out of your nostrils.
Yes. Not for 1 day or 2 or 5, but for a whole month until it becomes loathsome to you. And then a massive wind blows in this astronomical flock of quails from the Red Sea. Give me a picture of the scale of this because the numbers in the text are wild.
The scale is ecologically terrifying. The text says the wind brought the quails and let them fall by the camp, about a day's journey on this side and a day's journey on the other side.
That's miles of birds.
Exactly. And they were flying about 2 cubits above the ground, roughly breast high, making them incredibly easy to knock out of the air. The people went into an absolute frenzy.
I could imagine.
They stayed up all that day, all night, and all the next day just gathering them. And the text notes that the person who gathered the least gathered 10 homers.
Okay, translate 10 homers for a modern listener. What does that actually look like?
A homer is a dry measure roughly equivalent to a donkey's load. 10 homers is about 55 to 60 bushels.
Wow.
To visualize that, imagine an average modern compact car completely filled to the windows with dead birds. That is the minimum amount that a single person hoarded.
That is bonkers. They were driven by an insatiable, hysterical greed.
They spread them all out around the camp to dry and cure them in the sun.
But the text says that while the meat was literally still between their teeth, before it was even chewed, a massive plague breaks out and strikes down the people who lust it. They end up naming the place Kibroth Hadavah. What does that mean?
It translates from Hebrew as the graves of lust or the graves of craving. And the modern takeaway here is profound. This isn't just a simplistic story about lightning bolts from the sky punishing people for wanting protein.
Right, it's deeper than that.
It is a deep psychological and spiritual truth about the natural, devastating consequences of unbridled, toxic cravings. God's wrath here operates through natural consequence. He visits the gluttonous through their gluttony.
It's the old saying, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it.
Precisely. Getting exactly what you greedily demand can sometimes be your absolute undoing. They forced the issue. They demanded the familiar comforts of their past at the expense of their present freedom.
And the sheer excess of what they demanded literally chokes them.
Yes.
So we have this massive camp-wide rebellion driven by the mob. But immediately after this, the text pivots to a highly intimate personal rebellion at the very top of the leadership structure. Miriam and Aaron, Moses' own sister and brother, turn on him.
His own family.
Yeah. And the stated reason they give is that Moses married a Cushite woman, an Ethiopian. But you read the very next line, and they reveal what's actually bothering them.
Yeah.
They say, has the Lord indeed spoken only by Moses? Hasn't he spoken also by us?
It is a classic misdirection. They cloak their professional jealousy in the language of a moral or spiritual objection.
Which is so common.
Very. I mean, Miriam is a prophetess. She led the women in worship. Aaron is the high priest. They are already at the absolute pinnacle of the social and spiritual hierarchy. But proximity to power often breeds the deepest envy.
They want the top spot.
They see Moses' unique, intimate relationship with God, and they resent it. They want equal footing. They want a triumvirate.
I see this dynamic in modern corporate culture all the time.
Yeah.
Like a vice president who has immense power, a massive salary, a corner office, but they are utterly miserable because they aren't the CEO.
Right.
And instead of admitting they are just power hungry, they start a whispering campaign about the CEO's personal life, in this case Moses' wife, just to undermine their authority.
It's a petty.
But what really stands out is how Moses reacts. He has all this power, but he doesn't use it. The text drops in this parenthetical note. Now the man Moses was very meek, above all the men which were upon the face of the earth.
That word meek is often misunderstood today as weakness or passivity. In the ancient context, it means power under control.
Oh, that makes sense.
Moses doesn't defend himself. He doesn't call a press conference to argue his credentials. He doesn't retaliate against his siblings. He stays completely silent and lets God manage his reputation.
And God's intervention is swift and honestly terrifying. God calls the three of them, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, out to the tent of meeting. The pillar of cloud descends, and God unequivocally establishes Moses' unique role.
He leaves no room for doubt.
Exactly. He tells them that with other prophets, he speaks in visions and dreams, in dark sayings. But with Moses, he speaks mouth to mouth clearly. God essentially asks him, why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?
And then the cloud lifts.
Yes, and the anger of the Lord burns against them. And Miriam is left completely covered in leprosy, her skin as white as snow.
The physical affliction mirrors the internal spiritual rot of envy. Aaron is absolutely horrified. He immediately repents, turning to Moses, the very brother he just tried to undermine, and begs him, "Oh, my Lord, please don't lay this sin on us."
And Moses doesn't gloat.
Not at all. True to his character, he instantly cries out to God, "Heal her, O God, I beg you." God heals her, but there's still a consequence. She has to sit outside the camp in isolation for 7 days, bearing the shame of her mutiny before the camp can move on.
It is a stark reminder that even the most devout, high-ranking leaders have profound flaws and are subject to petty jealousies. So thinking about this entire first section, the practical takeaway for you, the listener, is really audit your own desires.
Very important.
Where in your life are you romanticizing your own Egypt? Are you ignoring the manna, the daily blessings, the current provisions, the freedom you've fought hard for because you're obsessively fixated on what you don't have?
Or what you used to have.
Exactly. Are your cravings for the familiar actually leading you back into a state of emotional or spiritual slavery? And when you look at the people around you who have what you want, are you disguising your envy as a righteous critique?
Those are difficult, necessary questions. And what's fascinating here is how this internal rot within the camp perfectly sets up the next psychological hurdle they face.
Right, because they finally move on.
Yes. Once Miriam returns, they pack up. They finally reach the wilderness of Paran right on the southern border of Canaan. They have arrived at the doorstep of the Promised Land. They have survived their internal complaining, but now they are forced to look outward. They face an external fear of the future.
This brings us to the famous story of the 12 spies. God tells Moses to send men to scout out the land of Canaan, one leader from each of the 12 tribes.
It's a major reconnaissance mission.
A huge one. See what the land is like, whether the people are strong or weak, whether the cities are camps or strongholds. They are even told to bring back some of the fruit of the land.
And this is not a quick weekend trip. The text tells us they scout the land for 40 days. They travel all the way up through the Negev Desert in the south, into the Central Hill Country, all the way up to Hebron, which was a massively ancient and fortified city even then.
They are doing a thorough, deep-cover geopolitical survey.
Exactly. Of the entire Bronze Age landscape.
And when they come back, they bring proof of how incredibly fertile the land is. They go to the valley of Eshcol and cut down a single branch with one cluster of grapes. But this cluster is so massive, it literally takes 2 men to carry it on a pole suspended between them.
Along with pomegranates and figs.
Right. They lay this massive bounty at the feet of Moses. At first, the report sounds great. It surely flows with milk and honey, and here is its fruit. But then the tone completely shifts. 10 of the 12 spies initiate an absolute panic.
The but in their report is one of the most destructive words in the entire narrative. They say, however, the people who dwell in the land are strong and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there.
The Anakim. These were essentially understood to be a race of literal giants.
Yes, in the ancient Near Eastern context, the Anakim were legendary warriors of immense stature. To these desert-weary former slaves, seeing massive, walled Canaanite city-states and towering warriors was deeply traumatic.
So they completely lose their nerve.
The 10 spies summarize their despair with a famous, haunting phrase. They say, "We were in our own eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes." Only 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, try to calm the mob.
Caleb says, "Let us go up at once and possess it."
But the 10 others shout him down, spreading an evil report saying the land devours its inhabitants.
I have to pause here because this is where a modern reader really struggles. I look at these 10 spies and I think, isn't it just smart leadership to be realistic?
That's a common question.
If you are a group of nomadic former slaves and you look over a hill and see massively fortified stone cities and armies of legendary giant warriors, why is God so angry at their basic self-preservation instinct? Why is it a moral failure to look at an overwhelming enemy and say, we can't beat them, we will die?
That is the exact tension we need to explore. To understand why this is a profound failure and an obstacle to growth, we have to look at what fear is actually doing to them.
Yeah.
God isn't punishing healthy caution. He isn't against strategic planning.
Okay, so what is it?
He is addressing a catastrophic breach of trust. You have to remember the context we established earlier. This specific generation has experienced paradigm-shifting, supernatural interventions. They watched the 10 plagues dismantle the greatest empire on earth.
The Red Sea, the manna.
Exactly. They are eating miraculous bread from the sky every single morning. And yet, their immediate assumption upon seeing a fortified city is that God brought them out to the desert as a sadistic joke to have them slaughtered.
Oh, they literally voiced that exact fear. The whole congregation starts crying again, and they say, "Why does the Lord bring us to this land, to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will be a prey."
They even say, "Let's choose a new captain, and let's go back to Egypt."
Unbelievable.
It is a deep, profound insult to the character of God. The obstacle modern listeners might resist here is the idea that fear can be a sin.
Yeah.
We tend to excuse fear as just a biological evolutionary response.
Right, fight or flight.
But when fear morphs into complete cynicism, when it causes you to look at a track record of absolute faithfulness and conclude that you are being set up for destruction, that is a toxic, destructive force. Their fear completely overwrote their memory. They allowed the giants in front of them to shrink the God behind them.
And the phrase they use, we were in our own eyes like grasshoppers, and so we were in their eyes, is so psychologically telling. Like, they didn't go up and interview the Anakim.
No, they didn't.
They didn't ask the giants, excuse me, what insect do we resemble to you? They projected their own profound insecurities onto their opponents. They decided they'd already lost before the battle even began.
It's self-sabotage.
If you view yourself as a helpless grasshopper, you will assume the rest of the world views you as one too, and you will act accordingly.
And the extrapolation of this refusal is tragic. God's anger burns, and Moses has to step in as a mediator again, pleading with God not to wipe them out completely. God pardons them from immediate annihilation, but he hands down a devastating, inescapable sentence.
Because they refuse to go in.
Right. Because they refuse to step into the future, they will get exactly what they asked for. They will die in the wilderness. God says that every single person 20 years old and upward who complained will not enter the land. They are sentenced to wander as nomads for 40 years.
40 years. Just wandering.
1 year for every day the spies search the land until that entire adult generation passes away.
It is a staggering consequence. But there is this incredible bitter irony in the judgment. God says, but your little ones, which you said should be a prey, them will I bring in, and they shall know the land which you have despised.
That part is so poetic and tragic.
The very children they used as a moral shield, the children they used as an excuse for their cowardice, are the exact ones who will inherit the promise. The parents claim they were protecting their kids by not fighting. God says their kids are going to fight the battles they were too afraid to face.
It highlights a sobering reality about generational trauma and responsibility. Sometimes a generation is too deeply conditioned by their past Egypt to embrace the freedom of the future. They have to pass away before the new generation can take the land.
Which brings us to the practical reflection for this part of the journey. Do you suffer from the grasshopper complex?
Good question.
How often do you project your own insecurities, your own lack of self-worth, onto your obstacles or your competitors? Do you convince yourself you are a grasshopper, and therefore it's not even worth trying to secure the promotion, fix the relationship, or start the project?
If you let the grasshopper complex take root, you will sentence yourself to wander in a wilderness of your own making, never realizing the potential that was laid out in front of you.
So practically speaking, you now have a massive encampment of over 1 million people who've just been told, your grand mission is canceled, the conquest is off, you are stuck in this brutal desert for the next 4 decades until you all die of old age.
Which is an absolute powder keg.
It's a recipe for a massive mutiny, which naturally brings us to the next psychological and structural crisis.
Yeah.
The rebellion of Korah.
Right. We move into number 16, and the tension finally snaps. We meet a man named Korah who is a Levite. He forms an alliance with 2 men, Dathan and Abiram, who are Reubenites.
And they gather a following.
Together, they manage to gather 250 princes of the assembly. These aren't just random complainers. The text calls them men of renown, famous leaders, representatives of the congregation. They march right up to Moses and Aaron and confront them with a highly calculated political argument.
They say, you take too much upon yourselves. All the congregation is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Why then do you lift yourselves up above the congregation of the Lord?
It sounds so noble on the surface.
Right, I have to be honest. When I read this through a modern 21st century lens, Korah sounds like the hero of this story. He sounds like a champion of democracy.
He really does.
He's fighting for equality. He's standing up against a monopoly on power held by 2 brothers. He's basically saying, we are all holy, we all have value, stop acting like an aristocracy. Why is Korah the villain here?
That is a very natural modern reaction, and it's a profound obstacle to growth if we don't untangle it. We have to apply some serious wisdom with discernment here, distinguishing ancient political realities from our modern democratic ideals. We are not endorsing a specific political system, but we have to understand the mechanics of this ancient theocracy. In the world of the text, God established the leadership structure. Korah's rebellion isn't a genuine, principled push for a democratic republic. It is a cynical, oligarchic power grab masked as populism.
How so? Like, what is Korah's actual motivation?
You have to look at the tribal geography and the lineages. Korah is a Kohathite, a subset of the tribe of Levi. The Kohathites camped on the south side of the tabernacle. Guess who else camped on the south side?
Oh, let me guess. The Reubenites.
Exactly, the tribe of Reuben. Dathan and Abiram are Reubenites. Now, Reuben was the firstborn son of Jacob, but his tribe lost the rights of the firstborn due to his actions in Genesis.
They have a chip on their shoulder.
A huge one. So you have the Reubenites, who feel they should be the political leaders of Israel by birthright, camped right next to Korah, a Levite who is angry that Aaron's family gets to be the high priest, while his family only gets to carry the tabernacle furniture.
Oh, wow. They literally conspired in their tents.
Yeah.
It's a coalition of the resentful.
Exactly. So Korah doesn't want equality. He just wants Aaron's job. He's disguising his personal ambition and deep-seated envy as a moral crusade for the people.
Ah, I see. Moses sees right through the rhetoric, too. He says to Korah, "Is it a small thing to you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation to bring you near to himself? And do you seek the priesthood also?"
It is a timeless, dangerous dynamic. Ambitious individuals will often cloak their hunger for personal power in the righteous language of liberation. They weaponize the grievances of the crowd to elevate themselves.
And Moses proposes a terrifying, definitive test to settle the matter. He tells Korah and his 250 men to bring their bronze censers, put fire and incense in them, and stand before the tabernacle the next morning. Aaron will do the same. God will show who is truly holy.
It's a high-stakes showdown.
The next day, the glory of the Lord appears. And Moses says something chilling. He says, "If these men die a normal death, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates a new thing, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them up, then you will understand that these men have despised the Lord."
And the resolution is visceral and immediate. As soon as Moses finishes speaking, the ground literally splits apart beneath the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abram, swallowing them, their families, and all their goods alive into Sheol.
Just gone.
At the exact same moment, fire comes out from the Lord and completely consumes the 250 men who are offering incense. It is absolute, catastrophic divine judgment defending the established order.
You would think a literal earthquake opening up and swallowing the rebels would definitively settle the debate for the rest of time. But this is where human stubbornness just breaks my brain.
Oh, it gets worse.
The truly shocking part is what happens the very next day.
It is almost unbelievable. The very next morning, the entire congregation of the children of Israel gathers against Moses and Aaron, and they accuse them, saying, "You have killed the people of the Lord."
They just watch God open the earth, and they still blame Moses.
And this is where we see the profound core wisdom regarding the true, crushing burden of leadership. God's wrath flares up at the sheer, obstinate rebellion, and a deadly plague begins sweeping through the camp like a wildfire, dropping people instantly.
So what does Moses do?
Moses sees it and shouts to Aaron, "Take your censer, put fire from the altar in it, lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation and make atonement for them." Think about the mechanics of this moment. Aaron is the high priest. He is the very man this entire mob has spent the last 2 days rejecting, insulting, and trying to overthrow.
And they basically wanted him dead.
Right. And what does he do? He doesn't say, "Good, let them die." He grabs his censer and runs into the plague. He physically runs into the danger, standing between the dead and the living, risking his own life to make atonement for the enemies who wanted him dead. The plague stops, but 14,700 people die.
That image is seared into my mind. An old man in priestly garments, surrounded by thousands of corpses, holding a smoking bronze censer, putting his own body on the line to shield a mob that hates him.
It is incredible.
And that is the core wisdom here. Aaron proves his legitimacy not by demanding respect or claiming a fancy title, but by risking his life for his detractors. True leadership isn't about privilege. It's a terrifying, self-sacrificial burden of responsibility.
To permanently cement this, God instructs Moses to perform one final, quiet miracle. He has the leader of each of the 12 tribes bring a wooden staff, a rod with their name written on it. They leave them in the tabernacle overnight.
Right.
Aaron's rod is placed there for the tribe of Levi. The next morning, Moses goes in, and while all the other staffs are just dead wood, Aaron's rod has miraculously changed. It hasn't just sprouted leaves. The text says it budded, blossomed, and yielded fully ripe almonds.
Why almonds? Is there a specific symbolism there?
Absolutely. The Hebrew word for almond is shaked, which stems from a root meaning to watch or to wake. The almond tree is the waking tree in the Middle East because it is the very first tree to blossom in the late winter, waking up before everything else.
Oh, that's beautiful.
By making a dead piece of wood instantly burst into almond blossoms and fruit, God is providing a powerful symbol of life coming from death. It proves definitively that God's choice of leadership is the one that brings life, vitality, and fruitfulness to the community, not death.
So connecting this to our own lives,
Yeah.
the practical reflection here is to deeply examine your own motivations regarding authority. When you are criticizing leadership, whether it's your boss at work, your local government, or leaders in your community, are you genuinely seeking improvement and the welfare of the group?
Or are you like Korah?
Exactly. Driven by unacknowledged envy and a desire for control, cloaked in the noble language of fairness. And if you are in leadership, are you willing to run into the plague for the people you lead, even when they are ungrateful?
Those are the mechanics of true authority. But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we also have to acknowledge that even the greatest, most self-sacrificial leaders are still human.
True.
The relentless, grinding pressure of a complaining populace eventually breaks everyone, which brings us to a massive time jump in the text.
Right, we are moving into Numbers chapter 20. We fast forward essentially to the end of the 40-year sentence. The older generation has largely died off in the wilderness, just as God said. The new generation is stepping up.
With a whole new group.
They're back at Kadesh in the desert of Zin. The text briefly notes that Miriam dies and is buried there. It's a moment of deep grief for Moses and Aaron. And immediately, in the midst of their mourning, there is no water.
And here we go again.
Exactly. The new generation gathers together against Moses and Aaron and starts the exact same violent complaints their parents did 40 years ago.
Oh.
Why have you brought us into this evil place? It is no place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates.
It's the exact same script. God tells Moses to take his staff, gather the assembly, and speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will give water. But Moses, who has mediated for these people for 40 years, who has endured their rebellions, who just buried his sister, he finally reaches his breaking point.
He takes the staff, stands before the massive mob, and instead of speaking to the rock as instructed, he completely loses his temper. He yells at them, "Here now, you rebels, must we fetch you water out of this rock?"
He just snaps.
And he takes his staff and strikes the rock. Not once, but twice. Water comes gushing out, enough for everyone and their livestock. The people drink. But God immediately turns to Moses and Aaron and delivers a crushing verdict.
A very harsh one.
He says, "Because you didn't believe in me, to sanctify me in the eyes of the children of Israel, therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them." I have to be completely honest here. My initial reaction to this is absolute shock and a deep sense of injustice.
A lot of people feel that way.
Moses loses his life's dream. The entire reason he left Midian. The reason he suffered for 4 decades. Because he hit a rock instead of talking to it.
Oh.
He makes one mistake in a moment of sheer grief-stricken exhaustion, and God says, "You're out." How is that fair?
It feels incredibly harsh to our modern sensibilities. It feels disproportionate. But if we dig into the mechanics of this event, it contains a profound core wisdom regarding the strict responsibilities of power, influence, and representation. Moses didn't just hit a rock.
What did he do?
God's charge is that Moses failed to sanctify him in front of the people. Look closely at what Moses yelled. He said, "Must we fetch you water?" In that moment of rage, Moses claimed divine power for himself. He made the miracle about his frustration, his power, and his ability, rather than God's gracious provision.
So he acted like a sorcerer drawing water rather than a humble conduit.
Exactly. The sociological framework of this theocracy depends entirely on the leader pointing away from himself and toward God. Furthermore, he let his temper override explicit instructions. He struck the rock violently, misrepresenting God's attitude toward the people at that moment.
That makes a lot of sense.
God was ready to simply provide water through a spoken word. Moses portrayed God as furious and striking out. Matthew Henry points out that Moses was supposed to be the ultimate lawgiver, the prime example of faith. By acting in public, violent frustration, he misrepresented the character of God to a brand new generation that was just about to enter the land.
So the standard is higher for him.
Exactly. In the spiritual economy established here, the standard is not flat. The higher your influence, the greater your power, and the closer your proximity to the divine, the higher your accountability.
The bar is just fundamentally different for him. It's a tragic moment, but it underscores that no one is above the requirements of humility. Shortly after this, the text notes another massive transition. They travel to Mount Hor, and Aaron dies there.
The end of an era.
Truly, Moses has to strip Aaron of his high priestly garments on the mountain and put them on Eleazar, Aaron's son, ensuring the succession. And you would think the people would be humbled by losing Miriam and Aaron and seeing Moses barred from the land. But they march on, they have to take a miserable detour around the land of Edom, the terrain is rough, and they complain again.
The text says, the soul of the people was much discouraged because of the way, and they speak against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there is no bread, and there is no water, and our soul loathes this worthless bread.
They're calling the miraculous manna worthless.
Yes, an absolute insult. So God removes his protection, and venomous, fiery serpents invade the camp. The bite is highly inflammatory and deadly. People are dying, the reality of their vulnerability sets in, and they come rushing to Moses, confessing their sin, begging him to pray.
And God tells Moses to do something that sounds incredibly strange.
Very strange.
He tells Moses to make a fiery serpent of bronze, put it on a pole, and lift it up in the camp. Anyone who is bitten can look at the bronze snake and they will live. This brings up a fascinating comparative insight. To a modern ear, this sounds almost like sympathetic magic. Or even worse, it sounds exactly like the kind of idolatry they were strictly forbidden to practice. Why a bronze snake?
It is a deeply strange and fascinating mechanism, but it taps into a profound psychological and spiritual truth about healing. The people are being forced to confront the very source of their pain.
Confronting the shadow.
Exactly. In many ancient wisdom traditions, and even in modern shadow psychology, you cannot heal from your trauma, your poor choices, or the consequences of your actions by looking away from them. You cannot numb out. You have to gaze directly at the symbol of your suffering.
Wow.
By demanding they look at the bronze serpent, God is requiring them to acknowledge their sin and its deadly consequence, while simultaneously exercising faith in the remedy he provided. They have to face the ugly reality of what is killing them in order to be saved from it.
That's a powerful, enduring symbol.
In fact, Jesus references this exact moment in the New Testament, comparing himself being lifted up on the cross to this bronze serpent in the wilderness, a symbol of the curse becoming the source of healing when looked upon with faith.
That is profound. The practical reflection for us is unavoidable. When you are bitten by life's consequences or the toxic results of your own bad choices, what is your instinct? Do you ignore the source of the poison?
Do you just numb yourself?
Right. Do you numb yourself with distractions and refuse to look at the mess you've made? Or do you have the courage to look directly at the ugly reality of your situation, the very thing that is causing you pain, in order to find healing?
Facing the shadow is the only way through it, and as they survive the serpents, they finally move out of the deep desert. They journey northward, bypassing nations, winning a few defensive battles against local kings, until they finally arrive at the plains of Moab. They pitch their tents right across the Jordan River from Jericho.
They are literally on the doorstep of the Promised Land.
They are. But this is where the narrative shifts gears entirely. They have survived their internal rebellions, the snakes, and the desert. Now they face a bizarre, insidious new threat from the outside.
So what does this all mean? Enter King Balak of Moab. Balak looks out from his kingdom and sees this massive horde of millions of Israelites encamped on his borders. He is absolutely terrified. He knows military force won't work because he's heard what Israel did to the Amorites. So he decides to engage in ancient spiritual warfare. He hires a man named Balaam.
Balaam is one of the most enigmatic characters in the text. He is a famous prophet and diviner from Pethor near the Euphrates River. He isn't an Israelite, but he has some connection to or knowledge of Yahweh. Balak sends elders with heavy fees for divination, begging Balaam to come and put a formal spiritual curse on Israel so they can be defeated in battle.
Balaam's journey is a story in itself. God initially tells Balaam clearly not to go, but Balak sends more prestigious princes and offers incredible wealth and honor. Balaam, who clearly loves money, keeps asking God, trying to find a loophole to get that paycheck.
He really wants that money.
He does. Finally, God says he can go, but he can only speak the exact words God gives him. And this leads to one of the most famous, almost comedic, yet deeply profound scenes in the text. Balaam is riding his donkey, heading to Moab, but God's anger is kindled because of his greedy motives, and an invisible angel of the Lord stands in the path with a drawn sword to block him.
It is a brilliant piece of irony. Balaam is supposedly this great, world-renowned seer, a visionary whose eyes are open to the spiritual realm. Yet he is completely blind to the angel of death standing right in front of him.
But the donkey sees it.
His donkey sees the angel perfectly. The donkey swerves off the road into a field to avoid the sword. Balaam beats the donkey to get it back on the path. Then the angel stands in a narrow path between two vineyards with stone walls. The donkey sees the angel, tries to squeeze past, and crushes Balaam's foot against the wall. Balaam beats it again. Finally, the angel stands in a place so narrow there is no room to turn right or left. The donkey realizes it's trapped and just lies down under Balaam. Balaam is furious and beats the donkey with his staff. And then, the text says, the Lord opens the mouth of the donkey.
I love this detail so much. The donkey literally speaks and asks, "What has I done to you that you have struck me these 3 times?" And Balaam is so blind with rage, so oblivious, that he doesn't even pause to register that his animal is talking to him.
He just talks right back.
Yeah, he just argues back saying, "Because you have mocked me. If I had a sword, I would kill you." The absurdity of a famous spiritual guru losing an argument to his beast of burden is just brilliant, ancient satire.
It deflates human pride entirely. The donkey asks, "Am I not your donkey upon which you have ridden all your life? Have I ever been accustomed to do so to you?" And Balaam has to admit, no. Eventually, God opens Balaam's eyes. He sees the angel with the drawn sword, and he falls flat on his face.
He realizes the donkey saved his life.
The angel tells him that his path is reckless and that the donkey actually saved his life 3 times. Balaam is thoroughly humbled and realizes he is entirely at the mercy of God's will. He proceeds to meet King Balak, but with a very clear understanding that he cannot manipulate the divine.
So Balaam arrives, and Balak takes him up to these high vantage points, these pagan high places on the mountaintops where they can look down over the vast camp of Israel. They build 7 altars, sacrifice bulls and rams, attempting to manipulate the spiritual realm into cursing this people. But every time Balaam opens his mouth to pronounce a curse, a blessing comes out instead.
It is some of the most beautiful prophetic poetry in the entire text. He looks down at this camp. Now remember what we, the readers, know about this camp. We know it is full of flawed, complaining, rebellious, fearful people.
Right, they are a mess.
But when Balaam looks at them under divine inspiration, he doesn't see their flaws. He sees God's covenant. He says, "How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, and your tabernacles, O Israel. Like valleys they spread out, like gardens beside a river. God brings them out of Egypt. He has, as it were, the strength of the wild ox. Surely there is no enchantment against Jacob, neither is there any divination against Israel."
Balak is absolutely furious. He slaps his hands together and says, "I hired you to curse my enemies, and behold, you have blessed them these 3 times. Flee to your place. I thought to honor you, but the Lord has held you back from honor."
And this highlights a profound cosmic contrast that is vital to the theology of numbers. Up on the mountain, there is this massive spiritual battle happening. A foreign king is spending vast wealth, slaughtering animals on altars, trying to destroy Israel with dark arts and curses.
And down in the valley.
Down in the valley, the Israelites are completely unaware. They're just going about their daily lives, cooking manna, feeding their sheep. They don't even know this threat exists. God is entirely protecting them from external spiritual attack. They are completely immune to Balaam's curses because God has declared them blessed.
It's a beautiful picture of security. But, and this is the dark, tragic twist of human nature, because Balaam cannot curse them from the outside, he realizes there is another way. He may be a prophet, but he still wants Balak's money.
He figures out the loophole.
He figures out the mechanics of this protection. A people protected by God can only be destroyed if they separate themselves from God. So before he leaves, he gives Balak some indirect, incredibly sinister advice.
Yes, the text mentions this explicitly later in Numbers and in the book of Revelation. Since he can't curse them externally, he advises Balak to destroy them from the inside. Following this counsel, Moabite and Midianite women are sent down into the camp of Israel. They invite the Israelite men to their feasts to worship their local gods, specifically the idol Baal-peor.
And the strategy works flawlessly. The Israelites fall for it completely. The text says the people began to play the harlot with the daughters of Moab. They commit whoredom, they eat the sacrifices of the dead, and they bow down to these foreign idols.
It's a total spiritual collapse.
The very people who were completely invincible to a powerful external curse end up willingly bringing a deadly plague upon themselves through their own lust and moral compromise. God's anger is kindled against Israel for joining themselves to Baal-peor, and a massive plague breaks out, killing 24,000 people.
The tragedy is staggering. The plague is only stopped when an Israelite man brazenly brings a Midianite princess right into his tent, in plain sight of Moses and the weeping congregation at the door of the tabernacle. Phinehas, who is Aaron's grandson, the son of Eleazar, is so filled with zeal for God's honor that he grabs a spear, goes into the tent, and kills them both. This act of radical, decisive zeal stops the plague and makes atonement for the children of Israel.
It is a brutal, bloody end to the narrative arc we are covering today. But the core wisdom here is absolutely vital for understanding human vulnerability. A community or an individual can be entirely immune to external attacks. You can build up impenetrable defenses.
You can be completely protected from your enemies.
Exactly. You can be protected from your critics, your competitors, or the metaphorical curses that the world hurls at you. But you remain completely, devastatingly vulnerable to your own internal desires and your own moral compromises.
That is the ultimate lesson of the wilderness. External forces could not destroy Israel. Pharaoh couldn't do it, the Red Sea couldn't do it, the Amalekites couldn't do it, and Balak's curses couldn't do it. The only thing that consistently killed the Israelites was their own internal rebellion, their own lack of discipline, and their own willing surrender to their appetites.
That is the practical reflection for this final segment. Look at your own life. Where is your energy going? Are you spending all your time and mental bandwidth guarding against external enemies?
That's a great question.
Are you building massive walls against critics, constantly stressing over the competition, worrying about what the economy or the world is doing to you, while completely ignoring the internal habits that are actually rotting your foundation? Are you overlooking the small moral compromises, the private additions, the silent resentments, or the wiles that are actually destroying you from the inside out? It's a terrifying realization that you might be your own worst enemy.
Synthesizing this entire deep dive into the Book of Numbers, the overriding theme we have uncovered is that the wilderness is not just a geographical location between Egypt and Canaan. It is a psychological and spiritual state.
It's the ultimate testing ground.
It is the necessary crucible where our deepest fears, our toxic nostalgia, our resentment of authority, and our hidden self-destructive desires are dragged out into the light.
It's where you find out who you really are, when the familiar comforts of your past, your Egypt, are stripped away, and the promises of your future, your Canaan, haven't arrived yet. You are forced to deal with yourself.
Precisely. And so the final provocative thought I want to leave you with as you process everything we've unpacked today is this. Is it possible that the promised land you are seeking is being delayed not by external giants, but by the fact that you haven't yet let your internal Egypt die?
That's the heart of this section. This is wisdom for the present, where understanding leads to clarity, and clarity shapes how we see and live. We'll see you in the next episode.